So that means that there's a lot of water and that it's also moving along the Ke cycle, along the controlling cycle, and it's suppressing the fire. So although we've got this fire with the fire and with the horse from the stem and the branch, we've actually got this yun, which is a whole load of coldness and water, lots of it, that is suppressing that fire. So I would suggest that we, in terms of the whole year, we don't have this massive fire that everybody's talking about. In fact, in the Suen, what it talks about is it talks about coldness, and it talks about false fire, unrooted fire, fire that is not well rooted in the water, because this water is overwhelming the fire. So the sorts of illnesses that they're talking about are not those things of, sort of everything going way too hot and blah 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 blah. They're talking about things being um either too cold or unable to digest properly because there isn't enough fire for digestion, or maybe some kind of insomnia, but insomnia because of the fact that the shen isn't able to be well rooted in the water, something like that,
Mm.
as a general thing.
And often
Yeah.
when there are these sort of opposites at play, they'll oscillate quite quickly, right? Between one and the other. So it could be cold and heat, and these we see a lot of
Yeah.
those
In
kinds of
fact,
things happening.
when you look at the individual 6 seasons, most of them are pretty cold, and then there's one mega mega hot period in the middle of our summer.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it makes sense.
mm.
So, welcome back to the Purple Cloud podcast. And joining us today is the lovely Deborah Woolf, who we were just talking, just almost submitted her PhD thesis on the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters of the Huang Nei Jing, which is what we're kind of here to talk about mostly. But Deborah's been in practice for, as I understand it, around 25 years. She's affiliated with the British Acupuncture Council and has been doing some pretty serious academic work as well. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
It's a pleasure to have you on here. And maybe we could get started. You could tell us a little bit about your PhD thesis.
Well, it kind of came about by accident, really, because the college where I trained and where I taught for a long time focused on what they called stems and branches. And my family is, I'm half Italian and half English. So I was brought up bilingual. And the moment I started studying acupuncture, I realized that there was a massive problem with translation. So people used some terms and then they translated it. One person translated it one way and one person translated it another way. So I stupidly thought, I could just learn a little bit of medical Chinese and then everything's going to make a lot of sense. So I started doing that and gradually got more and more into the language and realized how absolutely wonderful it was. And then I sort of expanded further and further, and I really wanted to, but I wanted to stay within the medical stuff. And it was really hard to find anybody who was interested in Chinese medical stuff, really, because there seems to be a divide between sinologists who know all about Chinese language and Chinese history and all that kind of stuff, and acupuncturists who don't know anything about Chinese language or Chinese history, but are practical. And I kind of am on this weird bit in the middle, kind of bridging the two. So eventually I met somebody who could help me. And she said, why don't you come and do an MA? So I did an MA. And then after that, she said, why don't you come and do a PhD? And I said, well, what would I do a PhD in? And she said, well, you teach that really strange thing that nobody knows anything about. Why don't you do it on that? So I ended up, thinking, well, okay, fair enough. I've been teaching Wu Yun Liu Qi for a long time. Maybe I could have a look at, exactly what it's all about and where it comes from and, those kind of things.
Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about exactly what sort of aspects. I mean, I'm assuming people understand the Wu Yun Liu Qi is the chapters of the Huang Nei Jing which relate to the weather. prognostication and this kind of thing. But what sort of aspects of this have you been studying in your PhD?
Well, specifically the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters, which are Suen 66 to 74, but not including 72 and 73, which were probably put in later and haven't got anything to do with it, were written by, well, they were interpolated by Wang Bing in 762. And he talks about them in his introduction to the Suen. So it's a very specific system that you can't really find anywhere else. And originally, when I first started studying this and teaching it, people talked about it as being stems and branches. And that caused me quite a lot of confusion because I didn't realize that the heavenly stems and the earthly branches are actually something to do with the calendar, something to do with all sorts of areas of Chinese history, and had been going for a really long time. But specifically, yes, it's a prognostication system for the climate. And then there's an underlying assumption that the what happens on the outside also affects people on the inside. We've got a climate on our inside, and that responds, if you want, to the outside climate. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. So there are various levels. You've got kind of more beyond our earthly sphere sort of climate, and then you've got the climate that affects us on a day-to-day level. And the way they describe this is in terms of 5 seasons and 6 seasons. And this is the 5 yun, what they call the 5 periods or the 5 great movements, or I call them 5 circuits, and the 6 qi, which are not exactly, well, qi is such a broad word anyway. So the way that they describe what's happening on this much smaller level, 5 seasons or 6 seasons, is they look at the interaction between the guest and the host. And the host is what we expect in terms of our seasons. So in summertime, we expect to have heat, and in wintertime, we expect to have cold, all those kind of things. And then the guest is something that can come in and will affect the host, and it can do that in many, many different ways. It can strengthen the host, it can attack the host, all that kind of stuff. So I was specifically interested in the use of these 2 terms, because these 2 terms, guest and host, Ke, you don't see them together anywhere else in the Nei Jing, or really in any other kind of early Chinese medical texts. So that's where I sort of started my journey, and then I continued down a crazy rabbit hole or 3.
Oh, that's awesome. So did you see this terminology of Ke and Zhu, did you see it in other texts, obviously non-medical texts of the period?
Yes,
so that's
exactly what I did.
Yeah, what
Yeah,
sort of
good question.
texts did you yeah,
Good
what sort of-
question, because
I'm
where did it come
curious.
from?
Yeah.
Yes. A good question, because when I started, I was like, okay, I'm going to look at Ke, but where does this turn up? I have no idea. So I did a vast quantitative analysis, sort of a big chart, excuse me, where I looked at a really broad range of texts from pre-Qin all the way to Song Dynasty, because I figured that, there got to be something in there. And then I focused in on when I could find these Ke, this guest host binary, because I had to have 2 of them together. And I found them, originally, I found them in astronomy, because they use Ke to talk about, well, it's not quite comets, but sort of things that come in the sky that aren't usually there, something like that. So I was like, okay, that's fair enough, but I'm still not finding Zhu. Where's the host? And eventually I discovered that there's a whole load of them in military divination, which I didn't even know existed. So I've basically spent the last 7 or 8 years of my life looking at military divination. And they're mentioned once as a yin yang binary in one of the Ma Wang Dui texts. So,
Right.
when it talks about, it says, father and son and yin and yang and and at a certain point down this list, it says Ke Zhu, and then it says host and guest. So that's the very, very earliest thing that I've been able to find is in a Ma Wang Dui text.
Yeah, amazing. And obviously you're a clinician as well as an academic. So is this an active, I'm assuming it's an active part of your medical practice as well?
Absolutely. It's been a part of my medical practice since I qualified, basically.
Yeah, right. And so it's really you. So this is what you were trained with in university, was it, or afterwards? Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I trained at ICOM with the International College of Oriental Medicine in the UK, which is it's now the longest running college in the UK. And they used to have a college in Australia, I believe, a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. So, and so when you, if I'm a patient, a new patient comes to see you, what sort of things are you thinking about in terms of, is this at like the front of your mind at most times, or is it somewhere in the back of your mind when you're sort of interacting with a patient, or it depends?
I mean, it does depend. Generally, what I do is I try and have a good look at what the Suwen has to say about the climate for the year and how it affects each of the different parts of the year. So I've got an overall view for what to expect for the year and what to expect for the different seasons in the year, the 5 or 6, actually the 6 seasons of the year. And then I also um, have a very simplified Barter way of trying to look at what somebody's internal climatic environment is. And then I look at how the external environment that is predicted is going to affect what's happening with that person's internal environment. So if somebody's got a lot of dampness and I know it's going to be a really damp season, then I'm going to preventatively try and kind of deal with the dampness so that they're not going to be so affected. That's probably a fairly
Yeah,
simple way
right.
of
So you're
explaining it.
incorporating Bards a lot into this as well as
Yeah,
the
it's a,
Wu Yun Liu Qi. Okay.
yes, because Barca is not part of Wu Yun Liu Qi at all. It's actually a later development, and I don't do I do. It's really to do with Chinese medicine in that I'm looking at 5 phases and 6 chi and climatic factors more than looking at your mum, your dad, your children, where you're going, where you're coming from. I'm totally looking at sort of climatic stuff. So it's kind of like a simplified way of looking at it. It's not the full
Like a
thing. I have
climatic
trained.
a snapshot of someone as they're born, as a climatic kind of thing. Okay.
Yes, what
Right.
they tend to be sort of, what their imbalances tend to be, if you
Mm,
want, in terms of sort of climates. I mean, I have trained in Barca quite a lot, but I don't do the whole thing. I'm not, so I really use it in a totally medical way.
right.
Mm.
You were talking about Barza being dated a bit later than the Wu Yun Liu Qi, which got me thinking about the actual dating of Wu Yun Liu Qi, which is, I know there are, it became very popular in the song and all of that. I think you used the word interpolated in the tongue, but I'm curious because there are some people who say no, especially the practitioner side, who will say, no, it's exact, all the Shanghan Lun stuff is directly related to Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters, and they, some of the arguments are kind of interesting, but then the academics are saying no, dated much later. Wondering where you stand in your little bridge
Yeah,
in the
I
middle between the two.
Yeah, I get that. I can totally see why the herbalist Shang Hanlun. I'm not a herbalist. I'm just an acupuncturist. I can totally see why Shang Hanlun. They in the Shang Hanlun introduction, it talks about the Yin Yang Dalun, and
Mm.
the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters of the Su Wen are all called something 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 Dalun. So there's this whole discussion where they say, oh, maybe Wu Yun Liu Qi was actually based on this famous Yin Yang Dalun. Nobody has seen the Yin Yang Dalun, so we don't know where it comes from, or whatever. So, and I could totally see why herbalists and the Shanghan Lun say, oh yeah, this completely comes together in a really lovely way, because the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters do not talk about acupuncture at all. They only talk about tastes.
Mm.
So it completely fits with the herbal tradition. And I can see why they then expanded it into the Song dynasty when they talked about all this using Wu Yun Liu Qi stuff along with the Shanghan Lun for herbal treatments. That completely makes sense. Um, there's also a line of argument that is because Wang Bing was a Taoist, and he said that he received these chapters from his Taoist master. So there's also a line of thought that says, well, Wu Yun Liu Qi's been around for a really long time, and Wang Bing put it in there because it came from this kind of Taoist master. But again, there's no trace that says where this actually comes from. So historically, we can really only say that he interpolated it in 762. Of course, there are these sort of currents that come through before 762 and before Wang Bing interpolated. It can't possibly have been fully formed and just duffed in there. There must have been stuff that came from before. So I would suggest that there's been, sort of thinking around this area, but no complete tradition until he put it
something that evolved possibly through time, and
absolutely,
who knows how long.
I cannot imagine that there was no evolution. Things don't just come out of nowhere. And when you look at the Daozang, you find quite a lot of little snippets of things that relate to sort of Wu Yun Liu Qi type thinking, but there isn't any complete thing until Wang Bing puts it in there. So I'm sorry, I go for the 762 date.
Yeah, fair enough. And it's such a fascinating topic. I've just moved to Tasmania a few years ago, and I didn't have access to 4 seasons in Australia. I'm assuming where you are, you do have these sort of seasonal elements, but actually being able to witness this stuff and have the Wu Yun Liu Qi and observe and compare it with the book with 4 seasons around me, it really opened my eyes. I've been interested in it a long time, but in Australia, it's very difficult sometimes to adapt. So I wonder if you've obviously spent time in different environments south of Spain. I don't know. How can people adapt this thinking? Well, especially once it moves away from the Yellow River or whatever, it sort of shifts and this kind of thing. I'm wondering if you had advice and thoughts on how people can adapt their thinking into these new environments.
Yeah, I think I mean that's a difficult question, and one that gets asked a lot. I think with Wu Yun Liu Qi, one of the things is that they talk about the quality of the whole year, then they talk about the quality of 2 halves of the year, and then they talk about these 5 or 6 seasons. So I think you can probably I think one of the best ways to do it is to adapt the year to the year starts in springtime. So whenever you've got springtime, that's the beginning of your year. So presumably in Australia, it's going to be, the opposite to what we have here.
It kind of should be, and it makes sense. It should be July or whatever it is.
Yeah. Exactly. So while I say, summer solstice is the 21st of June, I would assume that summer solstice is the 21st of December for you guys. Yeah. So, and because especially the 6 seasons, they're completely aligned with the 24 Jieqi, the 24 solar fortnights. So we can reorganize that chart if you want, so that what's at the top for me becomes the bottom for you and vice versa, that kind of thing. And that way I think it's actually surprisingly on the ball. For instance, we've just come into the whole of the year for Wu Yun Liu Qi actually starts on the 20th of January in the Northern Hemisphere, which is called Great Cold. And I've been watching this for quite a long time. And it really does happen that even in the UK, which doesn't really get very, very cold, to be honest, when I get to the 20th of January, there's a notable shift. So, I think one of the best ways to get into this is to look at the 24 solar fortnights. And that actually sort of prompted me a few years ago to do a whole series of looking at the 24 solar fortnights and see, how it all works. Because I couldn't quite get my teeth into it, and I thought there's something about these 24 solar fortnights. I want to understand how they work. So I spent a lot of time looking at that, and that really opened my eyes to how to align myself better.
It's interesting, you bring those up, because they were something In my masters, you must have seen these, come across these, the Chentuan's 24 solar fortnight exercises.
Yes.
So their depictions are in the book I'm studying for my masters. So
Ah,
and it's through that I really got into all of this Wu Yun Liu Qi stuff, because that is all a
yeah,
system. That's a whole system of Wu Yun Liu
absolutely.
Qi exercises, but it's not super explicit about it. But it's all the languages
No.
in there and
I
everything. And
totally agree. I
yeah,
totally agree. And in fact, one of the things that I did, I looked at various kind of time space schemes when I was looking at the solar fortnights. And one of the things that I looked at was I talked about the stems and the branches, and I talked about guest and host chi and all those kind of things. But I also looked at those exercises.
oh
So
really?
every time, yeah. So every time I looked at, what was the right food, what were the festivals involved, what was happening in the heavens, what was happening on Earth, climatically and all that kind of stuff. And then I looked at, which channels we would look at, because I also looked at the Shoujin tool where you've got that it's got the 24 solar fortnights, and it's also got the 28
Oh yeah.
lunar
I've
mansions.
got a
Yeah,
copy of it. Yeah. I
exactly.
know
So
that
you
one.
can see
They're
it
going up
moves,
his
it's kind of
spine. Yeah.
moving up the spine.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh
So I
yeah.
looked at
Yeah.
which spinal segment we were looking at, and I talked about those. And then we did the exercises. We all did the exercises. So we were all doing strange things online,
Oh, that's a great
because
way to.
it was
Yeah.
you could see it was all linked together. So, the
Yeah.
moment I started looking, I thought, oh, how am I going to do this? Because I don't want this just to be theory. I want this to be something practical as
Mm,
well. And then I came across those Chen Tuan things, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is actually all there.
yeah.
So I started using it all the time. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
amazing. I love them.
Yeah. The yeah, it's great you're doing this as a teacher. The physical side of things is very interesting, and there's a lot there, and it's like you say, it's all very much interlinked as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
What a fantastic thing to find. It was
yeah.
great.
Did you have anything else when you're doing your research where you had these sort of eureka type moments, or like you found unusual type things other than the military divination?
I mean, the military divination was an absolute eye opener. And I didn't know anything about it. And as I sort of analysed those kind of things, then that also came back to the Luoshu and the Hertu and all those kind of maps that I already knew about, and but I'd been taught about them in a very theoretical way. And then I could see how they were sort of integral to all thinking, that kind of stuff. So that was a bit of a major eye opener to me. And I ended up having a little bit of a side project where I talked about the Jiaogong, the nine palaces, and the movement of Tai Yi around the nine
Oh, right.
palaces,
Yeah.
which is one of the a couple of Ling Shu chapters. So I got into that, and I sort of went off on that one. So, I've kind of really, I've tried to rein myself in, because I keep on going off on these lovely
Uh,
tangents. And
Little
so more
rabbit holes.
recently,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. More recently, I've been saying, okay, this is a rabbit hole. I'm just going to put it aside and I'll deal with it later, because otherwise I'm never going to
Oh,
finish.
good on you. Yeah. I know
But
how
it does
tempting the
mean I've
rabbit
got
holes can be.
lots of things to look at. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's totally overwhelming.
Yeah. It sounds also like you've had maybe a bit of this study has induced a bit of a perspective shift, or this kind of thing, because you're kind of talking like you've been seeing things in different ways through this sort of study of the academic study and the practice. Is that right?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, I started off strangely anyway. My dad's a historian, or my dad was a historian, and so I think I'm an archivist at heart. And so the way that Wu Yun Liu Qi was presented to me was not presented in a very referenced fashion. And so one of my missions when I started teaching it was to really kind of reference it and made sure that I knew where things came from. And that kind of opened the doors to, oh my God, actually, this is all interlinked. This is like a huge web of
Mm.
different things that kind of come together, and you can see bits of them here and bits of them there. And so that opened up so many doors. And then, I just kind of continued from there. So now I'm
Mm.
like, how many exciting things can I research next?
So by these new doors, often it's like a door to, like you're saying, a completely new area of thought. Like all these areas of thought are all interlinked, and if you stay within medicine, only looking at medical texts, you don't understand the texts as well. I think
No,
yeah,
that's
you
been
understand
an
the
absolute
context it's
eye-opener.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Chinese history. I mean, I said my dad's a historian, so I'm rubbish with dates. I hate dates, because I just don't want to know. But no, it's Chinese culture, Chinese society. Understanding that has really deepened my practice fundamentally because I can, and really this started when I'm a long-term student of Elizabeth Rochade-Lavallée. She's a really good friend of mine. I've hosted her many times, and I started studying with her when I started studying acupuncture, really. And
She's fantastic. I love all of
yeah,
her little books. They're very simple. They've got a lot of information
fantastic,
in them. Yeah,
absolutely.
they're great.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm lucky because one of the places I lived in and went to school in was in France, and so I learned French, so I have no problems with her language. My mum speaks Italian with a funny English accent, so it makes no difference to me, to be honest. And she one of the things that I really, really love about Elizabeth is that she puts me in a place where I feel that I'm a Han Dynasty or a Tang Dynasty physician. And really that's what I want is the cultural feeling. So it's not to do with point combinations or how do I treat this or what do I do that. Really, I don't care what she's teaching. It's more the atmosphere that she puts me in, and that atmosphere really enlarges my medical understanding. And so that was the springboard that put me on to wanting to learn more about Chinese culture and Chinese history, because that really, really it's continued to feed into my medical practice. I can't really imagine not doing it, to be honest, not researching and studying, because I just understand so much more. Yeah. And I'm not I'm not a single focused person, so I'm not very good at being an acolyte, to be honest. I'm not very good at saying, this is, I'm going to practice only in this way. Because, if you look at sort of Chinese history and Chinese medical history, there's so many centuries of knowledge where they've just piled it up one on top of the other, that you can really sort of look at different ways of looking at the same thing historically over vast centuries. And I think that's amazing. It's like a humongous development of knowledge. And then there's the aspect about language that, I mean, China's one of the most amazing places because we can still read the oracle bones. The characters have not changed that much. So, I mean, I'm not an oracle bone specialist, but I can make a stab, you know. So, again, we've got all this stuff that we can look at. It's unbelievable. What a gift, to be honest. So I need another
Yeah.
sort of 10 or 20 lifetimes to get anywhere at all.
Yeah, I'm assuming what's behind me is just what's behind you, sorry, is just a small drop in the ocean of books you've been reading,
Yes, I am
your
a total
research. Yeah,
bibliophile.
yeah, I believe it. Maybe we can move on from the academic to the very practical and impending and have a look at what's or for the forthcoming year, what the prognosis is with the Bing Wu Nian. So
Okay.
I should also say you've got on your website, and I can put that in the show notes, a lot of your classes and this kind of thing, and a lot of them I noticed were complimentary. So if people are interested, I'd highly recommend you go check that out. But
Thank you.
yeah, and you also have a longer talk on what's coming out this year.
Yeah, I thought it would be nice to do something about this year, because I've been focusing on the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapter so much, and I also did a freebie short video for people who don't know anything about Wu Yun Liu Qi, so that they can understand what I'm talking about when they actually look at the one for the year, because I had a nasty feeling that they'd probably think I was just some kind of crazy, which I usually am anyway, so that's nothing new. Yeah, so one of the things that I want to talk about with this coming year is that that I found really difficult is that everybody always, I've noticed that most people talk about this year as being an incredibly hot, fiery year.
Mm,
And from a Wu Yun Liu Qi point of view, that is really not true.
mm,
So I feel like I'm one of the only people that is putting my foot in it and fighting for the idea that actually I don't think it's going to be a very hot year at all, at least not
mm,
according to the Suwen, it isn't.
mm,
And the reason why I'm talking about this is because this concept of Yun, this 5 Yun, these 5 periods or 5 circuits or 5 great movements, which they exist in Bazi, but they're sort of a little bit more of like a hidden thing. But in the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters, they have a really strong place. I mean, I mentioned that, you know, what happens is that there's a prognostication for the whole year, and then you look at the 2 halves of the year, and then you look at the smaller bits, the sort of 6 seasons of the year. And when you look at the whole year, then you look at the yun of the year, this circuit of the year, and you look at the stem of the year, and you look at the branch of the year. So when we look at the stem of the year and the branch of the year, the stem gives you the fire of the fire horse, and the branch gives you the horse of the fire horse. But they're not talking about the yun of the year at all. And actually, this yun, this circuit, this period, whatever you want to call it, this great movement, it has pride of place in the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters. They talk about it almost immediately, and it's a heavenly thing. It's to do with the heavenly stems. It's a circuit, like maybe a movement of a planet. It's described as a movement between one part of the sky and another part of the sky, between one of the lunar mansions and another one of the lunar mansions. The lunar mansions are like celestial coordinate system, basically. And it's, if you look at this Yun term, it actually means luck, but it also means circuit or period or great movement. So it's got sort of various different meanings. And in historically, you see that it's used to talk about matters of state, things that are beyond the individual, things that are beyond everyday life. And it's also described in terms of musical tones, which is interesting because that kind of makes me think of, you know, the idea of the music of the spheres. You know, it's something that's up there, astronomical terms and stuff like that. So when we talk about this year, this being Wu year, then the yun is a water yun. That's one thing. And the other thing is that you can have a what they call a tai guo, greatly excessive, or you can have a buji, an inadequate period. Yeah. So, and this one is a tai guo. So that means that there's a lot of water, and that it's also moving along the Ke cycle, along the controlling cycle, and it's suppressing the fire. So although we've got this fire with the fire and with the horse from the stem and the branch, we've actually got this yun, which is a whole load of coldness and water, lots of it, that is suppressing that fire. So I would suggest that we, in terms of the whole year, we don't have this massive fire that everybody's talking about. In fact, in the Suwen, what it talks about is, it talks about coldness, and it talks about false fire, unrooted fire, fire that is not well rooted in the water, because this water is overwhelming the fire. So the sorts of illnesses that they're talking about are not those things of, you know, sort of everything going way too hot and blah 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 blah. They're talking about things being either too cold or unable to digest properly because there isn't enough fire for digestion, or yeah, you know, maybe some kind of insomnia, but you know, insomnia because of the fact that the shen isn't able to be well rooted in the water, something like that, as a general thing.
And often when
Yeah.
there are these sort of opposites at play, they'll oscillate quite quickly, right? Between one and the other. So it could be cold and heat, and these, we see a lot of those kinds of things happening.
Yeah, in fact, when you look at the individual 6 seasons, most of them are pretty cold, and then there's one mega hot period in the middle of our summer. So
yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. And yeah, one thing I really liked about these chapters, giving them a read through just recently again, is there's a big focus, especially with the herbal prescriptions and this kind of thing, on the heart, it seems, which I really thought was interesting, given, I mean, yes, these are weather things, and the Bardsa thing will go more to what's happening in the world around us. And it just goes to sort of indicate these sort of porous boundaries. Like, this is a period where I think a lot of people are probably unsettled and going to be unsettled anyway. And looks like the weather's not going to be making anything much better.
No, it's definitely that external environment, internal environment thing where, we're constantly transformed and reacting to what's happening in the external environment. So you can read the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters as an external climatic thing, but you can also see it as how it's going to affect everybody around us, inside us. So I totally agree. And also there's that oddity in the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters about the fact that there's emperor fire and minister fire, which is one of those things that doesn't really happen anywhere else, later on, obviously, but it's one of the first times that they talk about this idea of emperor fire and minister fire. So you've got, heat and fire, and how do those interact, and, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Do you have any insight into that? Because it's quite a climatic kind of thing, and then it sort of becomes more of a medical thing later on. It seems quite climatic initially.
Yes, initially.
Did you see it in other texts? Like in
only in later texts, but more specifically in the Nei Jing by Zhang Jiebin, who he's I mean, he was in the 16th century, and he spent he actually classified his Nei Jing with the Yun Qi work first, which completely fascinated me, because I was like, okay, so this guy, he thought that this was really important, and he put it at the beginning, because where people put things at the beginning, that's where they think, this is the root, the origin sort of stuff. And he did quite a lot of work on this, how to interpret, emperor fire and minister fire, and how does that work, and with respect to Ming men, and all that kind of stuff in terms of medical things. But that's quite a lot later.
Yeah, it's kind of like, again, when I didn't go to the same sort of school you did, so this was all, I didn't learn any of this in school, but it's when you start to look through the history, especially post Song, it is like this undercurrent of it's almost everyone is referencing it, or at least thinking about it, and it's something that really has largely dropped off, I think. I mean, I didn't know about your curriculum, but it was really integral to the way people saw the world and the climatic kind of thing. And it's I'm just, that's why I like doing these podcasts about it. I'm always learning more about it, but even just a shift in that worldview, I think, can sort of, like you were saying with the vibes, or the vibes sort of rub off. It does create a shift in perspective that kind of does translate a bit to clinic, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened was that that Wang Bing did this in the tongue, and then it kind of disappeared for a bit, and then it got sucked in and pulled up in the song, and suddenly became this big thing. And I think it's also very much linked with medical theory and sort of Song dynasty, and afterwards doctors wanting to show their theoretical understanding, and I have to say that in practice it's very, very easy for people to go off and think about, well, what we call treating the chart rather than treating the person, because they're thinking so much about, and then there's this, and then there's this, and then there's this, and you're like, hang on, this is the person in front of you. I'm a very pragmatic person, so I'm like, hang on, okay, so in this case this would really work because for this person, but in that case for that person, I'm not even going there. This is ridiculous. So it's very easy to get carried away.
If you've got a broken leg, or I don't know, something like that,
it's
going to be much less important and effective.
Yes, exactly. yeah, you kind of triage, so
Mm.
this, with this person, I've worked with them and I've done this and I can see that, they could really benefit from this. I'm going to see if I can kind of move that way and I can support them that way. And I'm going to tell them what I'm doing as well,
Mm.
and some people really, really want that, and then you can work preventatively and do all those wonderful things. But some other
Mm.
people, you're like, come on, they're not here for this.
Mm.
I'm not gonna woo-woo them.
Yeah, fair enough. It doesn't seem that woo-woo to me, but I've drunk the Kool-Aid maybe. So if a patient is coming into you and yeah, will you look at, like, they've been coming to see you for a while, you've been treating them for a while, and you're having a look at what the seasons are, sort of the prognosis is, what's coming in the next few months. You'll let them know often, like, hey, the weather is likely to shift like
Yeah,
this, you need to take care, and all those kind of things.
yes.
Yeah.
I will. I'll usually say, look, I can see that you've got a bit of an imbalance or a bit of a weakness in this area, and I
Mm.
can see that this kind of climate is coming soon. There, I can help you with this, but I also want you to think about, eating those kind of foods, or sometimes I give them exercises to do, or sounds like I really love the six healing sounds, things
Mm.
like that. Small things that you can give people that they can do. Generally, I don't give advice about diet too much unless somebody asks me or they know me well enough, because
Mm.
I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in the UK, people always have a brilliant diet,
Oh
which
yeah,
I don't
sure.
agree with.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm half Italian, so I'm on the food front. I think English food is disgusting. I cook Italian food, I'm like, no, this is just terrible. So I don't even listen to them when they say I've got a perfect, I eat really, really well, and you're like, oh no, here we go. So yeah, I'm a bit careful about that. But if they ask me, then I will always give advice.
Yeah, right. And the feedback you get from people on this sort of, what sort of feedback you get from the prognostication, if you're saying the weather's going to shift in this sort of way, and um, yeah, I'm just curious what patients
I
do
mean,
this and that. Yeah.
I'm wary because obviously, what the Suwen says is going to happen and what actually happens might not match,
Mm.
so that's also another area that is difficult. If they do match, then that usually means that things are kind of, it's not going to be too difficult to treat, basically. But
Mm.
if they really don't match, then that means that there's some sort of the wrong kind of pathogenic chi around. So that
Mm.
makes it a little bit more difficult. So I don't tend to say, I expect there's going to be this kind of climate. I say
Mm.
something like, I think that it's possible that we might be going into this area, which is an
Hmm.
area where you already have problems. So, let's see if we can try and help you to get over that.
I
And
gotcha.
I think people are generally very interested because part of the thing is that people don't think about the fact that they've got any kind of climate at all. So,
Oh, yeah.
you sort of introduce this idea like, if somebody's got loads of damp and they've got that kind of foggy head, I say, oh, you've got damp in the head. And they kind of look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? But, they kind of get the idea. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and you know what it's like with patients, or maybe you don't, I don't know. But, people either, you're their person or you're not their person. And,
Mm.
again, that's fine. There are loads of
Yeah.
other people to go and see. And if you're my kind of person, then I'm going to tell you what I think and we'll get on.
Mm. Yeah. I think you really hit on something there when you're talking about, people don't know what climate even is, and doing similar sort of research, and the cyclical thinking, not this linear time but the cyclical time, and actually really getting into that,
Yeah.
you realize there are rhythms, and people are actually quite detached from them.
Yes.
When you start observing them, you realize you're pretty detached
Yeah.
as well. I mean, we are, as and I wonder, how many effects that has on mental health, but also physical health and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Yeah.
time is definitely cyclical. I completely agree. In fact, I would say that it's spiralic in that you come down to the same place, but it's not the same place because time has moved on. So it's the same quality of chi, but you're on the next time, if you see what I mean. So, I would argue for a spiral kind of movement, but definitely not linear. And with respect to people not being aligned at all, I mean, they have no idea. We live in this completely detached world from our natural environment. I mean, I walk, I forage, I go outside as much as I possibly can, and I'm extremely lucky because my family comes from the Alps, so I've always been in the Alps, winter, summer, spring, fall, whatever. So that it's a you really feel it. And in a way, that the solar fortnights exploration was part of me trying to really get into aligning myself even more. I thought,
Right.
wow, 15 days, 5 days, this is crazy stuff. I want to see how this works. So I really tried to kind of align myself as much as possible. Mm.
That's interesting practice. So while you were doing that, obviously you were kind of living. What sort of effects did you notice while you were doing that?
It
Like getting
it
aligned.
completely Yeah, it completely changed my way of dealing with the food that I ate, with the way that I, literally the way that I interacted with my external environment. I was going out pretty much every single day, and I was really noticing the difference in the trees and the flowers and the birds, the sky. It was just amazing. I was
Mm.
very lucky, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Mm.
Fantastic to hear things like that. Um, well, if do we have any advice for practitioners and people in the coming year, the being Wunian, about what they can do and what they should look out for? General sort of, we talked about the general themes, but be practical.
Strengthen people's water, find ways to strengthen their water, anything you can to strengthen people's water, so that they can, root the fire, basically. You don't want the fire to go off on one. So I would expect that that's the most likely thing. There's going to be this kind of summertime in the northern hemisphere where things are supposed to be incredibly, incredibly fiery. So I work on the idea that you work on the opposite season. So now is a really good time to be
Yeah,
strengthening people so that we can manage summertime. If we don't do it
yeah,
now, we're not going to be able to firefight in the summer, to be honest.
yeah.
Mm.
And climatically, a very hot summer that maybe goes a little long and then drops off or something like that. Is that
Yeah,
something?
like
Yeah,
it's going to be a pretty full on summer, I would
yeah.
say. It's like, yeah, way too hot, you know.
I mean, that sounds a lot like what's happening here at the so it's yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
We've
Well,
had
we've just got
record heat.
continuous rain. We've got
Yeah,
flooding. It's completely crazy here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
wonder how
keep
much
rooting,
also, yeah, keep
keep
reading.
rooting.
I also wonder because there are these longer term climatic shifts that are happening, certainly. Um, and since I've been observing, it is still quite I've noticed general trends being quite accurate. Um, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this? You've been observing obviously a lot longer than me.
There are
Um,
longer shifts, and there are also condensations of particular climates. In the Wu Yun Liu Qi chapters, they've got so-called special years. And for instance, 2020 was a concentration of metal, funnily
mm,
enough. So also those, and so they come in kind of series. So we've just come through one series, and we're soon to start another little series. So that also makes a massive difference, and they're kind of like a longer term view fundamentally.
oh, right.
Yeah.
Are they similar to those? What do they call in bards? There are those they call them
They've
periods
got
or something.
10-year cycles, haven't
Yeah,
they? 10-year luck
yeah.
cycles. No, these are very specific years. They're called
Okay.
like Tianfu or
Oh, right.
Sui
Yeah,
Sui Hui. Yeah, things like that.
gotcha.
So the ones that are Tianfu or anything to do with that, there's a Tai Yi Tianfu, and there's another one. Those are like super concentrations of one type of climate, and so they're really over the top,
Mm.
basically. Like 2020 was over the top.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
it was. Certainly was. I hope this year isn't going to be as over the top.
Me too.
Yeah. So do you have any other projects coming up? Because you've just I understand you've just submitted your PhD. So what's next on the horizon for you?
Well, I'm currently doing a little bit of teaching here and there, but I'm basically going to go back to my rabbit holes and hopefully sort of do a little bit more sort of thinking and researching and welcoming any kind of teaching opportunities all over the world.
Yeah, right. Fantastic. Well, have a look out for all you have to offer on your website. It's AcuCPD or something.
Acupuncture CPD.
acupuncturecpd.com, and I'll put it
Yeah.
on my
Thank you very much.
show notes. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. And yeah, we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It's been lovely.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.